Let the record show that Chairman Sean Poole is absent from today's meeting. Member Randy Stout. Let the record show that Member Randy Stout is also absent from today's meeting. Member Lisa Burke. Member Joe Malin. Let the record show that Member Joe Malin is absent from today's meeting. Alternate Member Denise McKenzie. Alternate Member Michael Perez. City Attorney Nancy Meyer.
Looks like we have one signed up. Is there anyone else that wanted to sign up that didn't get a chance? Is there anyone else that wanted to sign up that didn't get a chance? Dave Mueller, I'm at him. Brian Smith.
Check 1 2. Hey, good afternoon, Brian Smith, 8202 Cormel Street. I'm a developer, I suppose, and this is a property I bought back in November. It's a vacant lot, about an acre and a half. And my goal is to do boat and RV storage there, but I'm getting the understanding that maybe some people in this commission and or the city council are having reservations about boat and RV storage, in the city. So I wanted to come today and sort of maybe hopefully alleviate some of those concerns you may have and tell you a little bit about the project. I'm going to do things like, 10-foot fence setbacks, landscape buffers, and those kind of things. So I'm trying to make it a nice place. And again, it's over on Cormel Street near the boat dock. So I hope and believe it'll be a good
Street.
Cormel Street, 8202 Cormel, which is parallel to 19 Pasco Way and Cormel. Papaya Street's over there close by as well. Okay. Yeah, I want to say I'm probably a couple thousand feet from the boat ramp, so I think it'll be a good addition to the waterfront district. Excuse me, can't talk. And again, I just want, if you guys had any questions, or I'm really curious, I guess, if you have reservations on, yay or nay, I'd like to hear what those concerns are, and hopefully I can, again, alleviate some of those concerns.
Pictures of the property.
Let me just jump in. So there's nothing specific in front of you about what is being proposed. It sounds like at some point there might be, so there's really nothing that they can opine on. If you're dealing with trying to bring something forward, at some point it might come to them, and then they can have that conversation, but they can't really give you like a foreshadowing of what they may or may not do.
Okay.
I don't know exactly what the conversations are you're having with the city, so it may be best if you talk to the city manager, and he can loop in whoever needs to be looped in.
Okay.
That would help. Maybe. Okay.
Thank you for coming.
See you next time. No, sorry.
Dave Mueller.
Dave Mueller, 5439 Blue Point Drive. I know you guys are looking at the context of this ordinance that affects Section 10-278 and various other components. Some of the other components in here, I know you're focused on adding the seawall provisions, which I think are fine. But there are some other things that were brought up in past meetings, and this would be the boat lift covers, and that's kind of in that boat shelters, boat slips. I'm just wondering if you might take a broader approach and look at all the pieces of this structure provisions, and rather than just doing this and have it come circling right back around. But anyway, that's my observation there, and then potentially when you guys get into discussion on this, I think we need some enhanced definitions around some of these terms. That's what I saw. Thank you.
I just wanted to let the record show that Member Joe Malin is present for today's meeting.
Apologize for being late.
Right. We're going to take any comments from members in the chair. Since you just walked in, we'll start this way, Denise. Mike?
No, and we talked about on this particular ordinance, there's a discussion of a percentage change. And I know that there's proposed percentage changes going into the citywide in the zoning. So I wanted to make sure that the board was aware that if, we're about to sign something in that we may need to
Right.
amend.
Yeah, so we'll talk about that when we get to the ordinance and you
Okay.
can point out what you're referencing. That'd be perfect.
Joe?
No, I'm good. I just have some things too, but I'll wait till we get into it.
And I don't have anything right now, so we will get into it.
So as you know, you saw this last time you were here, and you guys had some very specific questions for nothing about anything that is in here, except I did type it, but I don't know any of the substance of it. So luckily, Mike is here to hopefully be able to answer some of your questions. I know some of those that posed the questions are not here today. So you can kind of start it however you wish. If you all want to take him one at a time, or however you'd like to move forward, just to start the discussion. And I would had mentioned last time there was a conversation or a request that we also at least discuss boat awnings. We didn't specifically put that on the agenda, but that's open. This particular provision in the code that you think we need to tweak or change or continue to talk about or investigate, it's open for discussion. That's why we made a kind of a generic conversation about this code provision. It's not just about the seawalls. The big part, of course, is the seawalls because we've tried to start that and it's been ongoing for a while. So we'd like to move it forward if we can. But if there's other topics related to this provision, we absolutely can address those too.
Well, I think Dave made a good point about not doing this twice.
Yes.
So
I
I
like
think
that.
we should add that in and talk about, which they have come up before, about the boat lift covers and anything else, what you brought up about the percentages.
Share that I tried, I believe last time we had some of our general discussions, I tried to find some other code provisions from other areas that address kind of the boat awning or boat covers, and I really haven't been able to find anything. So I don't have any examples to give to you, but obviously if there's something you're interested in doing, I can continue to look at what you're hoping to accomplish if that is something you want to change. But unfortunately, I just wasn't able to bring you a sample from other areas who have already addressed that provision.
I think we should look into it further. It's something that people are interested in, whether it's a permanent or a temporary, whether it can be farms or not. So there's things to be discussed about it.
So do you want to start with awnings and then move to seawalls after that? Whatever is your wish.
What do you have to say about the awnings? Anything?
It's fine with me. I mean, it's in the code that they're not allowed, but they're here. So, I mean, that's up to you guys. You want to change it and strike it out of there and then just put some kind of parameters on sizing,
Condition.
condition, what kind of materials, just so we don't drag it out to where it looks like our fence issue, put some parameters on it. And it's got to fall within the code of stuff, for structural ability, for, hurricane resistance and things like that. I know there was some discussions about back during a couple of the meetings about how the covers were taken off, removable tops or something. There's some out there now that got fixed trusses. So it's whatever you guys decide to do. It doesn't, whatever you guys put in, I'll enforce it. So it doesn't matter to me.
So I've spoken with a lot of residents on the water about the.
Sorry. I know you guys aren't used to that, so.
I don't know how to use this technology.
You did it. Perfect. First try.
So I've talked to a lot of residents in the city about this over the decade plus that I've been here. And pretty much everybody that I know that lives on the water would love the idea of having some type of fixed cover, just because gel coat repair is obnoxiously expensive, and some of these boats are worth $500,000.
And the vinyl seats.
And the vinyl seats and just everything,
And
birds,
birds.
every number of things. I have spoken with a couple of different manufacturers over the course of my time here. There's a company out of Hudson that builds a very attractive aluminum structure that meets hurricane rating for the structure, and they attach the canvas on it or the umbrella on it using a breakaway system. So they use a tether, so that when you get to a certain wind speed, the canvas comes off. Some places I've seen them done so that one side of them stays attached. So there's more of a permanent attachment on one side of it so that the other side, everything else breaks away so that it opens up and it flags. You're probably going to shred it, but at least then it's not in the neighbor's pool, 6 houses down. So it's a way to keep it intact. I understand why the provision probably was put in originally, because we do have a whole bunch of A-frame things that are built and obnoxious and they block view and they're ugly. But if you've got a 40-foot boat on a lift, it's blocking the view. It's a big boat and it's above water line. I would like to see something go in like these aluminum structures. Maybe we limit the profile height so that visually you're not breaking that view more than whatever the bow of that canopy is. You're not skirting it in some fashion. But I definitely, as a resident living on the water that has boats that are getting trashed by the sun, I would love to be able to put a cover in. And I think they are attractive. You go through coastal communities that allow for it, but they have code in there for it, like Madeira and Treasure Island, those places. They all have that same boat. Now, I just went through Hurricane Ian down there, and I can tell you that they don't survive Category 5 hurricanes. It's going to be a good day for the scrapper after a Category 5 hurricane, because they're going to shred. It's just the nature of it. Those things eat everything. But within the purview of what we can build, they can be built to withstand what current building code wants for an outdoor structure. We already have a provision, I think, for gazebos, right? In our like, I think for outbuilding style things, they have to be anchored. They have to meet
for accessory structures.
for accessory structures. So I don't know why it couldn't be even added to that provision, even maybe struck from this one and added to that one as part of an accessory structure on the water.
And it's not like it's something that you wouldn't see in a waterfront community. It's nothing that somebody would drive by and say, that looks out of place.
No, and like I said, there's a way to write it into the code. There's a way we can write it into the code so that we end up with something that beautifies the city and protects personal property. I mean, that's the whole point behind this board, right? Is to come up with a way to do that in a way that is enforceable by him without him getting run off the property by homeowners, because we've given him an unrealistic code to manage. So yeah, and I can look through some of the ones. I'm on a lot of different muni stuff for the flood stuff, but I would say any of those coastal communities running down the intercoastal, those are going to be the communities that might have code verbiage in there that limits it. Because like Madeira is super strict on what you can build there, but they do have them. So I have to assume that they have some pretty good verbiage in there.
So that's something you can look into further. Come back with the
Is there-
changes.
Just so I know when I'm looking, I'm using the word awning, I'm using boat covering. Is there another term that anyone thinks that they may be using? And that's why I'm not finding what I'm looking for.
Boat lift cover,
Yeah,
awning.
Shelter.
you could look for any of those. Boat cover, fixed boat cover, is what most of them seem to be referencing. Nautical garage is what Marco Island uses.
That's that thing.
What's Marco Island?
It might really be a crutch, right?
Yeah, that's a little fancy.
They're pretty though. Canopy, boat canopy might be a good term. I'm seeing some of that too. But like this particular set from this one company from Coastal Breeze is 180 mile an hour wind code, because they're building them for HVAC. They're building them for Miami. So, I mean, they can be built to do the job and can be pretty.
Well, I can definitely look with these new terms. Maybe I'll have better luck looking.
So you're looking for you're looking for materials.
Mhm.
You're looking for just the whole aesthetic of it. Also, safety factors or ratings. Size. Right.
I'll see what I can find, and we will continue to discuss that.
And are we strictly talking about this over like boat lifts or over docks? Or
I think we have to be careful of what we allow.
You have
so
to
that
be
we don't
careful
end up somebody building an entire apartment complex on top of their dock undercover.
no boathouses?
Do we have a provision right now for shade sails?
I'd have to look, Mike. I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah.
I don't recall.
Because I think a lot of communities over the boathouse, over the boat, they'll do covers like this because they're fixed and they have to maintain a shape. And you can't pull in on dock piles at the top of a lift with a shade sail without creating a problem, and you need that height. But over docks, I think shade sails is how a lot of communities are covering it. Is they'll allow shade sails because they're temporary, they're cable driven.
My point is, we're talking specifically boat lifts or docks.
Yeah. The company that I spoke with is Coastline Boat Covers.
Coastline Hudson.
Yeah, Coastline in Hudson. And the guy who owns that probably could hand you 30 different ordinances that he's had to either fight against or work with.
Very good place to start. Right, so I will look into that and bring it back to you. Anything, again, we can jump into seat walls, but if there's anything else that you guys wanted to address other.
I brought up the percentage.
Yes.
So
So what percentage?
So in speaking with Mr. Alexander, there's some provisions he's working on to possibly change the substantial damage and substantial improvement limit to 49%.
instead of 50?
Instead of 50. So it's FEMA's weird. When
Is that a FEMA thing? 49?
No, 50 is FEMA, but we can make it more stringent.
but FEMA likes it. So we get a better CRS rating the more stringent we get on anything that deals with flood. So in the city,
So 1% makes a difference.
it does, and it'll lower what the city pays for its flood insurance policy. It'll lower what all of the residents pay for their flood insurance policies. Anything we can do that enhances the flood capacity and lowers the risk to the community. Every home we elevate, anytime we put an ordinance in that makes it harder to violate Florida Building Code and FEMA rules, our CRS rating gets better.
So it can be no lower than FEMA, but it can be. Am I saying that
Correct.
But it can
Yeah,
be higher.
Same
So
thing with Florida
More
statute,
stringent.
Florida building.
Right.
code.
Maybe less.
right, it
It
can't
can't
be less,
it can be more.
which makes a difference in our ratings,
It
which
does.
makes a difference for the city, which makes a difference for everybody.
Right, because everybody in the town that's buying flood insurance, and even the folks that aren't, right? So for the residents that are concerned about why we're putting things in that don't affect them, if they say they don't pay for flood insurance, the city pays for flood insurance for disaster recovery. So it's part of their tax bill. It's part of their tax base. So whether they're on the water or not,
So indirectly it affects them anyway.
correct. It all comes back to how much we have to pay for the federal government to help us when they have to roll in here after a storm.
I'm sorry, did I interrupt you?
That's okay. Why stop at 1%?
Because it's a delicate balance. We're walking a tightrope. So we get a flood like we had. The substantial damage clause that's in there right now says that if you're going to do more repair work than 50% of the value of the structure, then you have to bring the entire structure up to code. That's FEMA's hard rule. We can make it a little more to get a little better rating, but if say we jump to 40%, because we get a much better rating. Well, now you get someone who just got flooded. They have inadequate flood insurance, and we hit their 40% threshold much sooner. Now he's telling a lot more residents they can't rebuild their homes. They can't have permits to put their stuff back together. So it's a balancing act of trying to make FEMA happy so that we get better ratings for the city overall and make it something he can enforce and not displace residents because
And FEMA went to the 50% after the 93 storm, correct?
The current ordinance that we have drafted Veronica, myself, and Florida Department of Emergency Management is taking it from 50 to 40 right now, but it hasn't gone in front of anybody yet. So, but that's a starting point. It can go to 45, it can go to 49, whatever collectively the city wants to do. So, and right now we're at 50% per year. So if you have a $200,000 building, you can do $100,000 worth of work every year to that building and still stay below the threshold of having to come up out of the special flood hazard area. So we're looking at that part of it as dropping to the 40%. We're also looking at raising the amount of freeboard from the 1 foot that we have now. So you have a base flood elevation, say it's 9. You have to put another foot on top of that. So your living first floor living area will be at 10 feet. We're going to add another one to it and make it 11. That goes toward our CRS as well. We're also looking at changing from the 1 year for substantial damage, substantial improvement, taking it out to 5 years. So cumulative within that 5 years, if you reach that 100,000 threshold of a $200,000 structure or above, then you have to take it out of special flood hazard area.
When you're talking about on the elevation rate, you're talking about if they have damage, then you're asking for it to be
If
raised.
you're in whether you have damage or not, if you're in a special flood hazard area, which 90% of the city is, whether you have damage or not, if your house, Lisa, is 200,000 and you want to do a remodel of your property, all that remodel that goes in there for that is included into that cumulative number. So if you want to do $50,000 this month, 6 months later want to do $60,000 upgrade, you've now exceeded that threshold, whether you have substantial damage or not, because it's a substantial improvement, and you're inside a floodplain.
Wow.
The idea is to bring the city to compliance and get everybody out of repetitive loss, get out of all the FEMA, basically the government funding all the disasters. And Mr. Perez can tell you, and Veronica and I just got back from the floodplain managers conference up in Destin. FEMA is actually going around now and auditing cities. So they're going to be a lot more tighter dishing out the money. So the more that we do as a city to bring our city into FEMA compliance, the better for our citizens.
And the thing to think about too, so there's two different numbers there. You've got substantial damage, which is something happens, we have an event, and then you have substantial improvement. So another option is to shift the numbers to make it so that maybe it's 40% on substantial improvement. If you're trying to add on to your house and you're in a flood zone, we don't, as a city, we really don't want people to add another 2,000 square feet onto a piece of property that's below the flood zone, because that's just more property that's going to be damaged if we get wet. So you could lower that threshold and make it 40% on substantial improvement, and then you could keep it up at 49% for substantial damage. So you're saying, look, if you get hurt, we're trying to work with you to make sure you can put your house back together. But the problem with it is that, and you can thank Louisiana for the reason that FEMA is so strict about this, is that year after year after year after year, they pay out right to that threshold. You get a contractor to come in and say, you look at your tax record and you go, okay, I can do up to $103,000 worth of work. And the contractor swings the pendulum to $102,000 on the contract. And you get your insurance thing and you put your house back together, and then it gets wet the next year again. And we're doing it again. And we're doing it again,
All right,
over and over again.
Yep. Okay.
And FEMA's tired of paying out for all those things. Some changes that happened to the FEMA code this year are that nobody's really paying any attention to, is that if you have FEMA flood insurance and if you've had 3 losses and the total of those losses exceed that 50% value of the structure, they will tell you are not getting insurance again. If the NFIP is no longer the insurer of last resort, they do not have to cover you anymore.
After 3.
If the property has taken three claims over its life.
No matter what the claim amount is?
No matter what it is, if the total makes it to that 50% of the value, because at that point they feel like they've paid for the house. They're not giving you insurance again until you bring it into code, which is not just elevation, right? It's elevation and windows and electrical and HVAC and all of these pieces. And if we spread this out over a bunch of years, you could be well within your limit, and then we get a storm. And if you've worked right to your limit and then we get a storm, you can't repair anything without bringing it into code. So, I mean, these are going to keep getting more and more strict. They're going to continue to tighten the noose on how much money they're willing to give to communities that aren't bringing things into compliance. Some places like Madeira Beach, is, in order to get their CRS rating where it needed to be because of the age of their houses, they're at 4 feet of freeboard over the base flood. So these rules are going to continue to get more strict. We're going to have this conversation every time there's an event.
So even though this kind of sounds like we got off topic of what we were talking about initially, which was the seawalls and 50%, it has everything to do with the seawalls too, because if the seawalls aren't correct, it's going to affect
All of it.
Right.
And what you're looking at in this code is not, we're adding the word seawalls, but it's talking about all those different structures, which would
Right.
obviously be affected should there be a water,
Right.
they could be affected should there be a water event. So we can change that 52 of 49. That number can be whatever you collectively want it to be moving forward to council. Obviously, it was 75. Bringing it to 50 was bringing it into some compliance with what we were going to be doing. And I know some things have changed, and there's going to be, I think, a workshop in the future about all this stuff that Mike was talking about that includes the 40.
Right, because he said they're actually considering going to 40.
So we can, I don't think leaving it 75% is a good choice. We can leave it at 50 for now. We could go to 49 for now. I would defer to him on what he thinks that it might be the most reasonable place to start. And again, if this passes and the other provisions that Mike is going to be bringing forth take a while, you can always go back and fix this one if you have to. Ideally, you don't want to have to do that, but you can. You're not foreclosed from saying, well, you already did 49, you can't go back and change it to 45. Because you don't necessarily want this to stall while that other conversation's happening. But that it can. That's just how you guys want to move forward with it.
Any questions?
You don't have any expectation of where that's going to land, because right now you're still spitballing on that.
Yeah. Right now, just because we haven't taken it to P&Z or anything. I know we were going to have a discussion. We had a discussion with the city manager about it. It's probably going to end up being a workshop and everything to go through. So, like I said, we went as stringent as we could, knowing it's not going to go to 40% because we're not going to get the buy-in from the entire city. And I get that. I understand that. I'm not trying to, move everybody out of their home, but I am trying to get the city up to its compliance that it needs to be. So, between planning and zoning and the council, it may end up at 45. It may end up at 48, 49. Worst case scenario stays at 50, and we just change the timeline from 1 year to 2, 3, 4, 5 years, whatever.
Okay. Is there a variability in the CRS rating bump that we get dependent on how much we swing that?
It did. Right now, we're at a 7 for the city, but we're only we're 200 points from dropping to a 6, and by raising the freeboard and implementing this ordinance, we have the potential of dropping to a 5, almost a 4. So that, and each percentage you drop is 5% off of your flood insurance. So the potential's there to drop 2 classes, and the further along down, because we don't do another cert for what, 2 more years, 3 years, when we do our next.
We just did a cert. We do an annual
Yeah.
certification, and then every 5 years, because we're at 5-7, we do a 5-year certification.
The city clerk just eyed me, so if you're going to speak, you need to go to a microphone, ma'am. There's no talking from the back of the room.
Sorry. So CRS it's a workshop in itself. There's different classes. There's 7 to 9 different topics that have to be covered in order for CRS points to come down. What Mike is referring to and what Mike is referring to is the codes for FEMA to make it more stringent, the substantial improvement and damage. That is a part of the CRS. So, but right now, yes, we're about 210 points away from a class 6.
Which is better.
Which is better than what we have. So that gives the residents an extra 5% on their flood insurance. However, there's some different criterias that have to be met in order for us to drop to a class 5 and keep going. The more stringent policies and ordinances that we have in place helps the ratings come down. It gives us points. So it doesn't necessarily say just by doing this, we're going to drop. It's a series of points that help us to get to that point. But yes, that helps immensely, because if we have the ordinances to back us up, then we can continue it. But ultimately, our goal is, we've worked on these ordinances for the past couple of months with Florida Department of Emergency Management, with the state. They have given us the verbiage. They have assisted us in writing these codes. They're ready to go to the city manager so that we can bring it forward. So it is something we have been working on in the last couple months. But
So the certification for 5 years. When was the last
so
one?
we had our recertification in 2021, and then now we go 5 years because we're a class 7. The minute we drop a class, it cuts our certification down. But currently, we're at every 5 years, they come and they do a walkthrough with us.
And if you do things in the meantime, it doesn't drop regardless.
I
If
didn't hear
you have, if things are done in that 5 year period, nothing changes
if nothing changes, then
until the 5 year until the recertification comes
so
up.
we can submit a recertification. We're waiting for some other
That's what I'm asking.
activities.
Can you get a hold of them
Yeah,
and say, hey,
every 12 months.
we've done all these things.
Yep. So every
Okay.
12 months, FEMA allows you to recertify if you have the documents and the activity points that you need. So every 12 months, we can try to lower our class.
But even though that we are doing these things, they have to be, we can't just say, hey, this is what we're doing. It has to be stuff that's already implemented. So once it's already implemented and we can show a tracking on it, that all goes into it. And like Veronica said, we're 210 points away. Just by raising the free board is going to drop us down, because it's going to give us those extra points. Also, with the GIS that we're doing now, because we have GIS coming up for all of the maps of all the city, of the entire city, and that's going to be a big chunk of points for our CRS as well. So there's a lot of, like Veronica said, I think there's probably 30 categories.
Under the GIS maps?
No, under the whole CRS plan, and each category falls up under, Veronica's got us partnering with Pasco County, and we're doing I'm going to mess this up, the PIP, not PIP, the PPI, and it's in conjunction with.
We're doing a multi-jurisdictional activity with Newport Richey and Pasco County that gains us extra points with our CRS rating as well. There's just several, but it's easier if we just do a workshop to explain what the CRS means, what it entails, what the activities are, because if I just shoot things out, you're not going to understand what I'm saying.
Right.
It's
But what you're saying is it's
ultimately-
a process,
yeah,
because it's more
ultimately
than one thing. You can't just
Yeah.
change one thing
Yeah.
and boom, you
It
drop.
all comes down to your CRS score and your flood insurance. That's what it ultimately, how it affects the residents. That's what it comes to. But it's a series of activities that have to be done and met.
And I would say we leave it how you've rewritten it now at 50 to get it to match what we're at right now in the city. We can always revamp that number when they revamp their number. And the workshop, I think, will look at all the other things you've already done and see how many points we can get by dropping those percentages citywide, and see what it would take to get to the next one. Because that's going to be the sell to the citizens. It's going to be, hey, if we lower this, yes, it lowers your threshold to having to do full repair, but that's going to happen once every who knows how often if we have a storm, and this isn't if we get there, we can get you a discount on your insurance every single year.
Right.
Until that happens. I think, to me, that seems like the variable, that thing seems like the variability that lets us buy the next tier of points if we're close. If we leave it at 50 now and see where all the other changes you're making are going to change, then we can see if there's a way to bump it one more by changing those percentages. Be my thought.
I agree with that.
All right, so we'll leave it at 50% for now. And I was actually going to put Mike on the spot again and ask that my thought was, I know this was changed to 50 to comply with some other things that are 50, but there's probably even more than one location where it's a 50%. So at some point, if this workshop comes forward and decided to go down to 49, there's going to be a revamp of quite a
Right,
few.
yeah, we'll have
So
to look at other.
we'll capture all the
Yep.
numbers that need to change at the same time. So getting this consistent with what we already have is, I think, a good starting point. All right, so then next section with some changes is 10-280 unsafe structures. You want to look at, just go section by section and see if anyone has any questions or comments.
Yes. Was the time frame not in there before you added it?
It was not in, I think it was
30
15.
days,
Yeah,
the
the
30.
yeah, the underline's the new time. So the 30
Right.
and the 90 are new. I think before we just have 15, which is pretty quick to have anyone doing
It
this. 30 and 90 may still be too quick to have people do something, but
Do we need to outline what demonstrate progress is?
yes.
Because how many people call you and go, I'm working on it? Close enough, right? That's I demonstrated progress.
To an extent.
Yeah. I'm just wondering if we make his job easier, if we outline what a minimum demonstrate progress is.
We can't, I've got some other, I can do internal policies.
Okay.
So what I was planning on doing is, because right now if you get a permit to redo it, you have 6 months before it expires. I can put a policy in place through the development services saying that their work must commence within 30 days. So, or 90 days or 60 days, something like that. And that way they're not just hanging out there for 5.5 months before somebody starts.
Pulling the permit is day one.
Pulling the permit is day one.
So do we want to maybe add language that they shall have 30 days from the date of notice to shall have 30 days from the date of notice to demonstrate progress per the building officials guidelines or something like that.
Yep.
So it takes us somewhere.
And your guidelines could be something like they have a contractor scheduled, or I mean, whatever you come up with.
Yeah, we can work that out during the permit process.
Then he can dictate that.
That's what I'm saying.
Separate from
Yes.
code. That
Yeah.
way building has a little more control over that.
Yeah.
Because as our post storm, getting a contractor may take 6 months
Right.
to get somebody lined up to do something. So that'll give him the ability, without us having to change the code, that'll give him some flexibility to make what progress means
Right.
within his division.
And then the change from what notification from 48 hours to 30 days.
I think that's
Is
I
the next
object to
section
that.
B?
It should be 3 to 5 business days. And here's, straight, Mike, have you ever seen an unsafe, dangerous, rotting, or derelict condition that was not connected with a hurricane?
Yes.
Do people know, does this stuff happen overnight? Or does it happen over a length of time that the property owner should know what's going on?
Yes, yes and no. Both. Some could be from storm damage. Some could be from lack of homeowner maintenance.
Okay,
Um,
so
The reason why I threw that in there is we had a situation behind the old, Senile now, used to be the Seaside, where they parked those boats. I wasn't out there. PD was out on the boat and actually caught it, and the whole dock was just laying in the water. So I gave the property owner the 48 hours, but it took him longer than 48 hours to get a contractor to come out there who had the equipment to get out on the water to go out there and actually pull it up.
And that's where I was going to go.
So that's why we kind of opened it up a little bit, because, I mean, technically, 48 hours, 48 hours. I mean, I could have cited him for it and we could have went in after it, but so that's why we opened it up.
So, and this is what I'm saying, if, like in section A, if they make a good faith effort, that they can show you that they have contacted someone and that they're actually going to get this work started, I don't see why we can't have language in there to say, showing good faith effort, we're doing it. But to drag this out 30 days after they get certified mail, that's 30 days after they get certified mail. Certified mail may take up to 2 or 3 weeks, depending on how long you take to get your reports and stuff done. And so now the neighbors are looking at, and I'm just saying not hurricane damage, the blighted, rotting, derelict conditions for another 6-8 months. And I think
I'm
that's
good with that.
something.
I mean, you guys can change it however you want and however you feel fits the city, I'll enforce it.
I think it's different things. I think this particular provision B, I think since it's directly dealing with hazards to navigation, I think needs to be a very short process before the city steps in and deals with it, because it's a hazard to navigation. Regardless of whether it's a hazard to navigation to recreational boaters, but if you have a scenario where the police boat or the fire boat needs to get down a canal and something's in the way, now it's a public safety issue. So I can see why you would have had it at 48 hours before, because it's a hazard to navigation. It's not the same thing as it's falling down and you're telling him he needs to repair it. Now it's falling down and it's laying in the canal and it's in the way of people getting in and out and moving around and doing things. So I don't know that I would have changed it away from 48 hours.
And we don't have to. That's why we're here.
Just purely because it's something that's happened, that's gone from derelict. If it's not a storm event, it's gone from I didn't maintain it to it fell off and it's in the way. And now it's something that they either need to get it out of the water or we do.
Yeah.
In as quick a period of time as possible.
So let me ask you this, just logistically and realistically, like you said, the situation you had, they physically could not contract with the right entity to come out. I mean, we don't want someone jumping in the back behind their house and trying to lift this stuff out, on their own to get it out of the way. Obviously, we want them to do it in a safe manner. If we know there's a time frame involved with that may be more than 48 hours. Even leave it at 48 hours, but put some kind of qualifying language like we did in subsection A.
Yeah.
That basically, as long as they're communicating with you per your internal policies or your internal guidelines, they're on the right track.
So maybe move it back to 48 hours, but then use the verbiage from the one above it, 48 hours from date of notice to demonstrate progress toward.
And the other key is where, that's unsafe and dangerous,
Right.
which are different than rotting or derelict.
Right.
Those are all in one sentence, which it's not all the same.
Do you want to tease that out then?
Well, I think it is. I think it's covered purely because because something could be
Something could
a
be on a,
hazard to navigation that's not currently dangerous to people.
right. Let's say one of the side canals is clear back in the canal. No boats really go back there, but it needs fixed. It's
Right.
it's rotting. It's derelict. It's whatever. That's different than, like he said, something at Seaside or where the police or fire boats can't get out.
Right.
Those are kind of the same, but not really the same thing.
Yeah.
So what I guess what I'm trying to say is we need to address more an immediate issue as opposed to somebody who lives on a side canal whose dock boards are rotted.
And that's what A and B are trying to do, in my opinion. A is
Yeah.
trying to address the more serious, but there's not an immediate hazard. B is trying to say, we got a serious issue here.
I think rotting and derelict is still an immediate problem if it's a hazard to navigation.
Right.
Whether
I
it's an
agree.
unsafe condition or not.
I agree.
It's
Well, I think B captures what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
And pretty much what I had at CNOW. And then what you're trying to say about others that may not be to that point, that covers A.
Yeah.
A is under that.
Okay.
So I
That
think
works.
if we just fix the notification time and leave everything out, I think you're okay.
Yeah, I think 48 hours from date of notice to demonstrate progress toward addressing the cited concern. And 90, and then if you want to give them, and then if you want to set a time frame to complete the repairs, or you could leave that under his purview, if you want to, and just have it simply state repaired or removed within 48 hours from the date of notice, or demonstrate progress toward addressing the concern
For his guidelines.
per building
Policies,
officials,
yeah.
building and zoning guidelines.
Does anyone in the audience have anything to say?
Dave Mueller, 5439 Blue Point Drive. It seems to me that if you're going to have some kind of damage like that and you're going to have to deal with it, you're probably going to have to go through the building department and get a permit anyway. Am I right?
Dave, are you talking about A or B?
Really, it would apply to either one.
Yeah, both.
You're going to need a building permit. The building permit specifies the length of time required to complete the task. So once that is in queue, it's automatically going to have progress toward that end. And are we, trying to refine this thing to extent?
This is more on the initial code enforcement side. The code goes out, see something, I go out something, we see a code violation. The permit's the secondary part of it. If it's something like the one at Seaside was just laying down in the water, and I think it was one of the shrimping boats backed into it, crushed it.
Basically neglect.
I agree. So that's where it was in the code, and the property owner just had trouble getting to it because nobody could get their boats out there. He couldn't get anybody in the amount of time. We worked together and got it worked out. But yes, the secondary part of that is they would have to come in and pull a permit and get it started. It's just, I don't want it to sit there, and I know the residents don't want it. I know you guys don't want phone calls, and I don't want phone calls, and neither does Matt, of how long it's taken for all this stuff to get done. Because I know we have one of those.
I'm looking at it now.
I know.
Okay.
I'm
And
good, yeah.
subsection C of that is just lawyer language. It just puts in writing something that we already have the ability to do, that the city can initiate a lawsuit if we need to enjoin somebody from their failure to do what they were doing.
Teeth.
Yes, just put it in writing. Let them know. The next section just added seawalls, section 10-281. So I don't know if anyone has any issues with that one.
No.
Section 10-313. Pretty much again, that's just adding seawall to the list of other water structures. Section 10-314 had the wrong word. We just changed it from occupancy to completion. Then not until 10-336 do we have some more changes, which is the same thing, adding seawall and changing it from certificate.
Can we go back to
Yes.
10333? It was brought up maybe about a year and a half ago that our code for building into a canal was in conflict with the state code. Did anybody ever look into that?
No one, no. So we'll look at that. So 10-333, right?
Yeah. I think ours is 30% and the state's 25%.
Okay. Do you know that, Mike, by chance?
No.
Oh, sorry.
I have the number of the guy who does.
Keep that number.
I think ours, off the top of my head, it's the width of the canal, half the distance, and you have to be 10 foot off of the half mark is where ours is at. And then once you get into the wider waterways, it changes. I think it's
30%.
is that where it's 30%? Okay. And we don't do a lot of those, so I really don't know which one it is that you're talking about, but we can look into it.
No, I mean, it's one.
But I noted that we'll look into that and make sure that's consistent. Right, then, okay, then the big one, page 8 of your packet, division 4 is added, seawalls. All that underlining is all new. This was a collaboration of various code provisions from a couple of cities that are on beach sides that have similar issues as you do here with your seawall. And Mike looked through them and kind of tried to make the best he could that would fit this community, of those suggestions plus some other ideas of his own. And so this is where some of the specific questions were, Mike, that I didn't even try to answer. Something about the green gray, and there was some other word that they asked about that I didn't even know what it was. Let me see if I can find that.
Riffraff.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I don't even know what those are. So this is the section. There's your guy.
It's basically rock. Instead of a seawall, you'll have a geo-webbing barrier down and rock on top of it, and it's just keep from getting tidal flood erosion. But instead of a seawall, or you can do a living seashore, things like that. It's in lieu of a seawall, basically.
And you read through all the new and
He read and wrote. He did a
and
lot of
wrote.
work. Yep.
Okay, then you agree.
I just put it all in one form. He
Right.
did all the hard work.
And a lot of this was put in for the purpose of, behind Mr. Mueller, that seawall's been laying back there since I've been here almost 2 years now. So it's an out-of-state owner, does not respond to us at anything at all that we do. So by putting provisions in there, it is now in my opinion, it's a hazard to the waterways. So without him being there, it now allows the city to come in there, pull it out, because I can go in there through CRA and Slum and Blight and tear it out, but there's nothing in there saying what I can put it back. So the rest of the yard don't sit there and keep filling up the rest of behind Dave's house.
Right.
So that's why a lot of these provisions in this section is in here. Because now, if I have a property owner who is non-responsive, the city can now act, and we can go back and put it in there, and we can lien the property, and then eventually, if we have to, foreclose the property. But it's to get it back to get more compliance is all it is.
So I know there's building code provision for sheet tiebacks, sheet pile versus concrete, all those things. Is there anything in the Florida building code when it comes to living seawall as to what they have, or is it at your discretion as to what they have to put in?
No, I will reach out. I'm working with our city planner because Safety Harbor's been doing a lot of it, and we're trying to incorporate that into the city now. It's just an option. It's not the option that we go with, but it is. It just depends on how it's going to come to council, however they want to go and put it back. Because I'm not going to go, because even if I put a seawall up, it's going to be 50 to 80 grand, and I'm sure they're not going to want me to write that check.
Does it depend on the actual canal and the property itself too? I would think it would,
will. I mean,
depending on what's there.
If we have a seawall that drops off next to a whole group of mangroves, I'm not going to go drop another one back in there. If we can put in a living seawall there, why not do it?
So it's dependent on the property and other factors.
Yeah, it's going to be subjective. It's just, how much we're going to put into it. What's the surrounding area like? Now behind Mr. Mueller's house, if it comes to that point, then yeah, we're going to go back with another seawall because everybody else down there's got seawalls.
And if you don't put one back, if you've got one living wall and everybody else has got a seawall and you don't have proper barrier on that living wall, then we get a tremendous amount of rain or a lot of tidal movement. It washes off. That water comes into that space around the other seawalls and washes the dirt back out through that and takes the neighbors with it. So that's why I was asking, because like down south right now, where after the storm came through and it washed all the bridges out, where they just had rock piled up, they went back with sheet piles and they drove sheet piles and then they dumped the rock over top of it. But at least they have something that's a water barrier to prevent sand from being drug out through the rock. I don't think it's something we need to tackle in this particular code, but probably something that you and your division could come up with through the council. Hey, let's put together what we think is an acceptable living seawall opportunity, just so that great, you don't want concrete, you want rock, and you want pretty, that's fine, but you need to have at least this minimum protection for your neighbors. Right. You've got to have at least this minimum protection. Because even if you pile rock up, you're going to pile rock up on these properties and try to get to the minimum 5 foot NAVD. And the first set of big storms, it's all going to settle back down and the sand and everything's going to wash it back out again. And it's all going to be in the canal if we don't have any kind of tieback or anything in it. So yeah, I like the way you have this written. I definitely think now you get to draft some interesting stuff on your end on how to make it work.
I'll add that to my list.
I can take some pictures when I'm down to show you what they did at Sanibel. That bridge at Sanibel was crazy. How they built how they put all that back together to stop it from just continuing the canals to keep continuing to wash the bridge out. It won't go anywhere now. They drove those things 35 feet.
Now we're to
And
103398.
yeah, pretty much it. So the last, the 10338 becomes 10337 became 10338, which is adding seawall. Mike did increase the class. That has to do with fine, how much fine they can be assessed, so he did increase that. I don't know what the financial connection was to class 3 versus class 6, but it's more. So, again, if we're serious, we want you to take care of your property.
Right. Incentive.
Fix it.
Yeah. So, and that's it. And then the section 2, 3, and 4, and 5 are just a bunch of lawyer talk. The crux of what you need to look at is the sections we just went over. To give us direction, I can add the information we talked about, rework some of the things, look at some of the stuff you talked about, and you're going to see it again. And hopefully when I do that, I will also have found something on boat awnings, or you and I will go out and, I don't know, we'll go on a field trip and
Sure.
find them. I don't know. We'll figure it out.
Boat day.
So we can get you guys some language to figure out what you want to do with boat coverage.
I think the guy up in Hudson, he'll be a really good resource for that. Because I know he had dealt with it in a lot of places. And they're all over Hudson. So Pasco County probably just doesn't have any verbiage that says you can't put them up, so they can put them up. They're getting them passed. I'm sure we can find something that refines it a little more.
Looking for a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.